The house still smelled faintly of plaster dust, that sharp mineral tang that never really left your nose once it settled there. The renovations had been going on for weeks, timed just right, one room gutted while another remained barely functional, chaos contained in stages. She'd fought him on it at first, said they didn't need it, said everything was fine the way it was. But he'd insisted. Said it was for her, for their future, for comfort. Said he wanted her to have a kitchen worthy of the meal she no longer bothered cooking. She smiled at that, distracted, kissed his cheek like someone signing a receipt. The kind of kiss that came with eyes still scanning a phone screen. So he offered a temporary solution. They'd stay with friends, separately, to avoid the mess. It made sense. She'd like her space. And he needed room to work, he'd said. Tonight he came back early. Not to see her. Not to catch her. Just to check on the contractor's progress. That's what he told himself. A half-truth, which meant it was almost a lie. The kind that slides by on quiet days. The kind you believe because it's easier. It was late afternoon when he stepped inside. The hallway was empty, light bleeding in from the half-taped windows in the living room. Dust motes drifted in the sunbeam, slow and aimless like ash from a dying fire. He walked through the living room, careful not to disturb the tools scattered across the floor, then turned into the newly painted dining room. White walls, pristine. The trim still taped off. But it wasn't the fresh paint or the lingering smell of primer that made him stop. It was the vase. A tall, jade-green ceramic piece they'd bought together in Santa Fe 4 years ago. She loved it. Said the glaze reminded her of rain on pine needles. He remembered that. She'd always said things like that when she was happy, odd metaphors with too much feeling behind them. He didn't mind. That was her poetry. But it wasn't the vase itself that froze him. It was what was inside it. Not flowers. Not the minimalist twigs she liked to stage for Instagram. Not dried eucalyptus, not even dust. Keys. A single car key, metallic and matte black, tucked deep in the vase's throat. Barely visible unless you leaned just the right way in the light. A Tesla key fob. They didn't own a Tesla. He stared at it for a full 30 seconds, unmoving, not breathing loud enough to hear. Then he stepped forward, slow, like the floor might give way. He didn't touch it. Just stood over it. Studied it. And there it was. The fracture. He could have told himself it belonged to a friend. A neighbor. The contractor, maybe. That she was holding on to it for someone. A favor. A coincidence. But the way it was hidden, not left on the counter, not hung on the hook by the door, but inside the vase, they told him everything he needed to know. No note. No reason. Just there. A thing that shouldn't be. A lie that didn't even try to dress itself up. And it didn't hit like a punch. That would have been merciful. It didn't explode. It seeped in, cold and slow, like water finding its way through cracked foundation. He felt it in his ribs, behind his eyes, under his tongue. Like metal. Like blood. He didn't move. Didn't touch the vase. Didn't storm into the bedroom, or call her, or slam a fist on the wall. That kind of thing, rage, that was for amateurs. For men who didn't understand how betrayal works. For men who still believed in honest accidents. He wasn't that kind of man. He simply stood there, the silence pressing in on him like insulation. Around him, the house was half finished, half ruined, depending on how you looked at it. The bare drywall in the hallway still showed seams. The paint bucket in the corner had dried around the rim, like a wound scabbing over. Eventually, he sat down on the edge of the dining room chair, the one she said was too stiff but elegant, the one she always shifted on like she didn't quite belong there. The key sat hidden behind ceramic walls, pretending not to matter. But it did. It was the kind of object that broke things just by existing. He looked around the room, not for her, not for proof, but for certainty. And in the stillness, in the gentle hum of a house in limbo, he found it. She wasn't gone yet, but she was already leaving. She started humming again. That was the first thing he noticed. Not a song he knew, not even a tune really, just a sound, tuneless and bright, threading through the house like smoke. It came when she was doing dishes, when she was brushing her hair, when she padded barefoot across the hardwood with her phone clutched too tight in one hand. The kind of sound people made when they were trying too hard to seem relaxed. It never used to be like that. She used to play music, real music, from her playlists named things like Rainy Day Road Trip or Wine, Please. But now she hummed, absent and unbothered, like a schoolgirl passing notes in church. He never asked why. She smiled more, too. That brittle kind of smiling, like a party mask made of porcelain. She wore it even when the room didn't ask for it. Like when he told her the cat had thrown up behind the couch, she smiled. Or when he mentioned his boss was cutting budgets again, still smiling. And not once did her eyes follow suit. It became a game, tracking the delay between her lips and her eyes, the second-long lag where her face didn't quite know what it wanted to do. It haunted him, made him feel like he was talking to a woman caught in a delay, like her soul was buffering mid-conversation. There were new words, too. Phrases she hadn't used before. Personal growth. Safe space. Emotional clarity. She said these things like she'd just come back from a retreat he hadn't been invited to. And when he asked what she meant by needing room to expand, she blinked like he'd asked her to define the color blue. It's just something she needed, she said. No specifics. No invitations to join her in whatever this new expansion was. Her phone, once face up on counters and charging docks, now lived face down. Sometimes even under a throw pillow. It beeped in new tones he didn't recognize, some soft, others short and sharp, and she always reached for it too quickly, like a surgeon waiting for a code. She laughed at things she didn't explain, tapped out replies with her back turned. And when he once asked, lightly, playfully, "Who's making you smile like that?" she said, "Oh, just memes," and closed her screen like it was a wound. He started noticing the small erasures. The way she no longer touched his shoulder when passing behind him. The way she stopped correcting his stories when he forgot details, something she'd always done, with affection, like a shared edit. Now she just let him misremember, let the past slide, as if it no longer belonged to her. She left laundry half done, left groceries in the car until he found them wilted. Once, she poured coffee into his mug and handed it to him with a casual sweetness, milk, no sugar. He hadn't taken it like that in years. Still, he tried to believe. He showed up. He played the part. He took her to the farmer's market, watched her smile at strangers, watched her pretend to notice the weather like it was new. He booked a dinner for them at the place where they'd had their third date, tried to recreate the conversation they once had about wallpaper patterns and whether they'd ever moved to a smaller town. She laughed, nodded, said it sounded quaint. Not perfect. Not ours. Just quaint. But then came the night he thought it might break. She was in the shower, and he was in the laundry room, not snooping, just grabbing towels. That's what he told himself. The light on her tablet was blinking. One new notification, plain and square, waiting on the lock screen. He reached for it, then stopped. The name wasn't familiar. Evan. Just that. Evan. No last name. No message preview. Just a quiet name pulsing against a black screen. He didn't open it. He just stood there, the room colder than it had any right to be. The washer finished its cycle with a hollow chime, but he didn't move. The notification disappeared, replaced by another. This one from a calendar app, 8 p.m., journaling session. But she never journaled. Not that he'd seen. Not even once. That was the moment it should have snapped. That was the moment to confront, to accuse, to dig. But he didn't. Not because he was afraid, but because he understood something deeper. This wasn't about catching her. This was about watching her go. She was already halfway out of the room, halfway out of their life, humming someone else's song. He folded the towel in his hands. Too neatly, almost reverently, then placed it on the shelf beside the rest. Her footsteps thudded upstairs. The water turned off. He turned off the light in the laundry room and closed the door softly behind him. From then on, he watched. Not with suspicion, but with precision. Not with anger, but with cold, patient stillness. Because now he didn't need to guess. She wasn't trying to hide. She was just waiting for the moment she could leave without looking back. It was the basil that did it. Not the emails, not the laughter behind closed doors, not even the name, Evan, that had started to thread its way through her Spotify playlist like a hidden signature. No. It was a single stem of fresh basil on the windowsill above the sink, clipped neatly from the backyard, tucked into a shot glass half filled with water. She hated basil. Always had. Said it was too sweet, too strong, too bitter. Would wrinkle her nose when he used it in pasta, would pick the leaves out of her food like she was sorting through poison. It had become a running joke, the kind couples tell themselves is harmless. He'd sneak it into dishes just to watch her react, and she'd pretend to be annoyed, flicking the leaves at him across the plate. But now, there it was. A basil cutting, fresh, unblemished, placed with care. A stem that wasn't his, wasn't hers, but someone else's entirely. He stared at it for a long time, eyes fixed like a camera lens locking into place, while her voice drifted in from the living room, cheerful, distracted, somewhere between a phone call and a lie. She said she was journaling tonight, had lit a candle, played ambient noise, and set her wine glass down beside a notebook that hadn't been opened. She said it was for her mental health. She said she needed clarity. What she didn't say was who brought the basil. He didn't move right away. He didn't need to. The scene had already done the talking. The glass wasn't from their set. It was too short, too thick. Not their style. Probably his. Probably Evan's. Probably brought over with a knowing smile and a kiss that still lingered on her mouth when she came to bed last night. That was the moment everything went still. The air, the shadows, even the ticking of the clock seemed to hold its breath. No alarms, no accusations, just a new clarity settling in like cold water down the spine. He looked around the kitchen, suddenly seeing the small changes as if a spotlight had been turned on. The extra bottle of wine she bought, just in case. The second yoga mat rolled into the hall closet. The unfamiliar mug that had quietly joined the others. It wasn't just another man. It was integration. A soft invasion she had been staging for weeks, possibly months, dressing it up in therapy talk and self-care hashtags while systematically dismantling the life they had built together. And the genius of it, what he almost respected, was that she had never hidden it. Not really. She just made herself harder to follow. Used vague words, broad concepts, euphemisms disguised as enlightenment. And he had let her. Watched her drift further while pretending not to notice. Until now. Now he saw everything. He picked up the basil, rolled the stem gently between his fingers, and felt the cool break of the leaves. Their scent was strong, so strong it made his nose sting, made his mouth taste green. He could almost see Evan standing there, clipping it with a grin, thinking he was clever, thinking he was invisible. That was fine. Let him think that. For now. Because something had shifted in him, deep and permanent, like a steel beam locked into place. The weight of heartbreak had passed. It was obsolete. He wasn't confused anymore. He wasn't trying to save her. He was done playing the fool who clings to a crumbling illusion while the termites laugh behind the walls. This wasn't his loss. It was his invitation. His wife had made a choice, and now so would he. Not in anger, not in noise, but in patience, in design, in silence sharpened to a razor's edge. He dropped the basil back into the glass and walked to his study. Not to weep, not to plan his exit, but to begin. It was time to catalog passwords, bank accounts, mortgage terms. Time to reset the locks, contact a lawyer, sort the sentimental from the strategic. Time to prepare the stage. She wanted growth? He'd give her a clean cut. She wanted space? He'd hand her the whole damn void. She wanted boundaries? He'd redraw the entire map with her on the outside. The war wouldn't come with shouting. It would come like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, clinical, final. And by the time she realized the performance was over, the lights would already be off. The curtains drawn. The audience gone. Let her chew her basil and think it tastes like victory. He was already gone. And she just didn't know it yet. It happened in the kitchen. Not dramatic, not planned. Just a Sunday morning she thought would go like all the others she'd carefully crafted. Avocado toast, almond milk cappuccino, the scent of that stupid basil hanging smug in the sunbeam. He was already at the counter when she walked in, humming again. Barefoot, careless, scrolling her phone with the same smile she used on waiters and clients she didn't respect. She didn't see the folder on the island until she was 3 steps in. A simple manila folder, unmarked, slightly bent at the corner. He watched her eyes find it. Watched them stick, hesitate, then flick away like nothing had happened. Morning, she said, light and bright like she hadn't just walked into a landmine. I was thinking we should finally check out that brunch place you mentioned. I heard they have oat milk now. She reached for a mug, poured water into the kettle. Perfect movements. Controlled. Unaware that the ground had already shifted beneath her. He didn't say a word. Just slid the folder across the counter with one finger. She didn't touch it. Just laughed, too loudly, like it was all a joke. What's this? Go ahead, he said, voice calm. You love surprises. She opened it. Slowly. Like she thought it might bite. Inside, photographs. Screenshots. Bank statements. A printout of her secret chat backup. Messages sent at 2 a.m. when she claimed she was journaling. Venmo receipts for Uber rides to locations that didn't match her story. And tucked behind it all, the kicker. A side-by-side of her favorite wine glass, the one she claimed had shattered last year, next to a photo from Evan's social media, dated 3 weeks ago. Her holding it. Her in his kitchen. She stared at it. Said nothing. Just blinked. Swallowed. Tried to smile again. Okay, she said. So you've been spying on me? I've been watching you, he corrected. There's a difference. Everyone needs space, she started, defensive now, her voice tighter. You've been so distant lately. I didn't know how to reach you. I was alone. Don't, he said, cutting her off gently, like ending a lullaby. Don't do that. Don't pretend this started with loneliness. This started the moment you decided my absence was permission. It's not that simple, no, he said, sharper now. It's not. Because simple would mean you made a mistake. This was rehearsed. This was replaced. You didn't drift. You pivoted. You started rewriting the story of us without the decency to tell me you were picking up a pen. Her hands curled into fists. I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done if you'd felt what I felt. He laughed once, quiet, joyless. You think this is about feelings? You think this is about not being seen, not being adored enough? I cleared my schedule for you. I built this home for you. I handed you peace, and you repainted it as prison because you missed the thrill of being someone's new mistake. She stepped back. You're twisting it. No, he said. I'm undoing the twisting. You talk about growth, but all you've done is hide behind it. You used boundaries as walls, not doors. You used self-care to excuse lying. And you know the worst part? You actually believed you'd be the victim when this all came out. You thought you'd sit here and I'd apologize for not being enough while you rewrote your betrayal into some kind of awakening. Her mouth opened, but no words came. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You made me believe we were renovating a home. All the while, you were furnishing your exit. You let him into our life, not just our bed. You let him sit in my chair, drink from our mugs, use my soap. And I stayed silent. I let you play this out, not because I was weak, but because I was patient. Because I needed to see who you really were when you thought I wasn't watching. Her face cracked, just a twitch. A shimmer in her eyes. She didn't blink away fast enough. You don't understand, no, he said. You don't. Because if you did, you'd realize this was never about Evan. It was about you. About how easy it became for you to be someone else when no one was clapping for the woman I loved. The kettle began to whistle behind her, high and shrill. She turned it off with trembling fingers. Silence followed, thick and heavy. So what now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Now, he said, almost smiling. Now you finish your coffee. You go to brunch. You keep pretending you're the hero in this. And I'll keep preparing the paperwork. The house is in my name. So is the car. The savings is split, but the proof is mine. You won't fight it. Because you don't want the truth aired any more than I already have. Her lip quivered. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words left. No mask left. Just a woman standing in the ruins of a performance that finally ran out of stage. He didn't leave. He stayed right there, eyes on her, steady and merciless. Watching her unravel was the final thing she could never erase. She followed him into the hallway, barefoot and frantic, voice cracking like glass under pressure, and suddenly the woman who had hummed through mornings and smiled with practiced indifference was gone, replaced by someone raw, someone unraveling. You're overreacting, she snapped first, the go-to defense of someone still hoping reality could be rewound with the right tone. You're being cruel, punishing me for something that was never about you. But her words stumbled over themselves, tripping on their own contradictions. He didn't look back, just adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, slow and meticulous, as if her chaos didn't reach him anymore. She tried again, voice sharper now. You think you're so perfect? You think you've never failed me? He finally turned, not quickly, just enough to let his eyes meet hers like a blade meeting skin. I never promised perfect, he said, voice low. I promised present. I was here. Every day. While you were busy reinventing yourself around someone who didn't know you before the edits. She flinched, like she hadn't expected him to respond at all. She backpedaled. I made a mistake. We both made mistakes. We were broken long before this happened. You just didn't want to admit it. He tilted his head, studied her like a stranger who'd wandered too close. You were bored, he said. So you broke the vase and blamed the room for being quiet. You don't know what I felt, she hissed. I gave you everything. You gave me a version, he replied. One that came with expiration dates you never mentioned. One that folded the moment someone else asked you better questions. Her jaw trembled. She tried to steady it with another pivot. You'll never find someone who loves you like I did, she whispered, like it was her last weapon. You'll never find someone who knows you like I do. He smiled, not kindly. No, he said. Because anyone worth finding wouldn't throw my trust in the fire just to feel warm for one more night. Her breath hitched. We can fix this. You already fixed it, he cut in. With him. With your new boundaries. Your new clarity. You made sure I wasn't part of the future. I'm just catching up. She blinked hard, tears starting now. Real ones, not curated, not calculated. The shift in power was undeniable. He wasn't chasing, wasn't reacting. She was the one clinging to smoke. Please, she said. Just that. Small. The word hung there between them, fragile and humiliating. You want forgiveness, he said, but you haven't asked for it. You've asked for comfort. You've asked to be let off the hook. But not once have you faced what you did. Not to me. Not to yourself. Because if you did, you'd have to admit it wasn't a slip. It was a choice. She reached for him, her hand trembling, but he didn't move. She stopped midair, fingers curled, inches from his chest. Around them, the silence of the house throbbed with everything unspoken. A neighbor's car door shut in the distance. A child's voice laughed somewhere across the street. Life, oblivious. Or maybe not. Maybe watching. Because people had seen. The text she left open. The photo he placed deliberately. The way her voice shook while trying to call him controlling in front of people who remembered how he'd left her birthday work party early just to get her car's brake pads replaced. She was spiraling, and they were watching. Pretending not to, but listening all the same. I loved you, she said again, like it could rewind time. Then you should have loved me when it counted, he said. Final now. Not in past tense. Not as apology. Love after betrayal isn't love. It's leverage. Her knees buckled slightly, hand catching the wall. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. She had run out of story. He stepped closer, not to threaten, just to look. Really look. No more confusion, no more pain. Just understanding. Cold, quiet, irreversible. This isn't revenge, he said. This is recognition. I finally see you. And I can unsee it. Then he walked past her, not with force, not with spectacle. Just absence. And that silence? That silence said everything. She showed up 3 months after the papers were finalized. No makeup, no umbrella, soaked to the skin in rain that made her look more like a washed-up extra than the woman who once ran their world with curated precision and filtered smiles. The same woman who used to time her outfits to meetings and her moods to applause now stood on his doorstep, shivering, broken, clutching her phone like it was a rosary and he was the last confession left to give. She looked smaller somehow, less assembled, her sharp edges dulled by public scorn and private implosions. Evan was gone, of course. He'd peeled off the moment the fallout got inconvenient, the moment her Instagram comments turned, her job pulled its offer for VP, and whispers in the industry started asking why the growth. Guru had lied about a marriage she publicly called a vault. Her friends weren't really friends, it turned out, just orbiting bodies attracted to her heat, now repelled by the smoke. Family stopped replying, tired of the excuses, ashamed of the headlines. Even her therapist had referred her out, citing conflict of ethical boundaries. And so she came to the only place that still haunted her dreams. His door. His silence. I still love you, she said first, like it had weight. Like it hadn't already burned itself to ash on every lie she fed him in the name of self-discovery. He didn't answer. Didn't even flinch. Just looked at her like she was a piece of mail that had arrived too late to matter. She tried again. We were soulmates. You know that. You felt that. All that time together, he raised a hand, not to silence her, but to pause her delusion. All that time, he said calmly, was before you started auditioning for a new life. She tried to cry, but the tears were dried out now, used up in phone calls no one answered, in bathrooms where she read old texts and tried to believe she hadn't rewritten history. Please, she whispered. Just talk to me. Please. But he had nothing left to say. Because he wasn't angry. That would have meant she still mattered. No, what broke her wasn't his rage. It was his indifference. That he no longer looked at her like someone who hurt him. He looked at her like someone who never existed. Like the wife she once pretended to be had died the day she chose herself and dragged him into the funeral. She tried to reach for his hand, but he stepped back. Not cruelly. Just naturally. As if her touch now meant nothing. As if it always had. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was complete. Her lip quivered. She opened her mouth again, but there were no words left that hadn't already failed. He didn't shut the door. He didn't have to. She walked away eventually. Not dramatically. Not with a scream. Just a quiet shuffle, like someone leaving a job they were fired from but pretended they quit. And as she disappeared into the blur of rain and regret, he watched her, not with longing, not with bitterness, but with the cold clarity of a man who had finally deleted the last corrupted file from a system he rebuilt by hand. Not out of revenge, but because peace demands it. And peace was all he wanted now. Thanks for listening. Let me know where you're watching from and what you would have done if it were your wife.